Look at the boss. I like the idea behind this film, the horror comedy aspect, the overall weirdness of it all. It's weird. You make a good point, Luke. It just has this weirdness that permeates throughout, right? It's not like a Stephen King movie where it's like, oh, we're set in the real world, like initially, but then we have this supernatural thing, the sci-fi thing, this fantasy thing that enters into it. It's like already when you're like in the movie, it's like this world feels like hyper style. It's like already it's larger than life. You can just tell by the way people interact with each other. Like everyone's like obnoxious or extra. And I can see that rubbing some people the wrong way. I get that. That being said, this movie has some of the worst dialogue I've heard. Perfect example is the priest. Oh, see, that's so funny. He could have been hilarious if he had been given funny stuff to say, but it landed flat. I actually liked that scene. Okay, so I know exactly in the movie, and the reason why I enjoyed that scene is I can totally understand why you don't like it. I get it. But the reason why I liked it is because my family literally had that priest. It was for the funeral of my grandfather on my father's side. I'll never forget this. It was so weird. Where we were having the funeral, and I'd never been to this church before. I'd never met this priest or something. And the priest just felt like, and you typically when you're a priest and you conduct mass, people might not be Catholic, you need to have like skills, like, public speaking skills, right? You need to be charismatic. If you're going to give a sermon, if you're going to like tell a story, right? You got to make a point like I think that's essential. You need to hone that. You need to craft that. This guy had none of that and was just socially awkward and stuttering and stammering. He went on a whole fucking tangent during my grandfather's funeral saying like, oh, your grandfather, he was, he lived a full life, and he did many good things and maybe bad things. Maybe he beat his wife. Like, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not joking. He literally like said, maybe Frank Herman beat his wife. And I was just like, and no one said anything because it's such an awkward moment. It felt like a moment in that movie. It felt like a moment in The Office or Parks and Recreation where you're like, it's like Michael Scott getting up there and just saying something so incredibly offensive. And how do you even respond in that moment? Because it's like my grandfather's in the casket and you don't want to interrupt him because it's my grandfather's, that's what it was. And so again, I had a very specific experience. And so that scene, I was like, yep, this happened. It's true. I'll never forget that. And it was like, oh my God. Okay. All right, my friends. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get to my review for The Monkey. Now, this is going to be a very short review. All right. Very laid back, very relaxed, obviously. I saw this movie a couple of days ago of Katria with my girlfriend. We had a pretty goddamn good time. Now, I'm a fan of a number of Stephen King books and a number of Stephen King, adaptations. The Shining, of course, is one of my absolute favorites. I thought Stanley Kubrick did such an amazing job with that movie. Jack Nicholson's performance is obviously incredible. It's so funny that Stephen King hates the adaptation. Like, I like the book. I actually think the movie's better. But it's so funny that he hates it. Of course, The Shawshank Redemption is one of the defining movies of the 1990s, in my opinion. One of the best movies that came out in, I believe, 1994. It was like that and Pulp Fiction, which I think either of those should have won the Best Picture over goddamn Forrest Gump. Other movies like smaller films like Stand By Me, an adaptation of Stephen King's The Body, I thought it was great, directed by Rob Reiner, who then went on to direct my favorite Stephen King adaptation, and honestly, just one of my favorite movies all time. It's probably my top 20 favorite films, and that's Misery. Of course, starring Kathy Bates and James Caan. Kathy Bates, who, of course, won an Academy Award for incredible performance as Annie Wilkes. I love the movie. I usually watch it several times a year. It's just such great. I love just how small and intimate, and something about it just really good. Just great performances throughout. Great thriller. And of course, listen, there's been some bad ones. there's been a lot of bad Stephen King adaptations, some bad Stephen King books. Dreamcatcher is one of the absolute worst. I read that book before I saw the movie, and the book is I mean, I think he did that when he was like recovering from his accident when he got run over by a car and he was on hooked on drugs or whatever. And you can fucking tell because the book is just nonsensical. The movie is wretched. And he's even said like that movie's terrible. That book is terrible. One of the ones that hurts me the most is the Dark Tower adaptation, which Dark Tower is kind of like Stephen King's, his magnum opus. His long-running series incorporating fantasy and science fiction and westerns and horror all into one. It's this epic tale. It's his Lord of the Rings, essentially. And that movie absolutely butchered it. Terrible. I mean, honestly, it should have been a miniseries or a long, not even a miniseries, an ongoing series, personally. But terrible. And even Stephen King, like, he's trying to adapt stuff. Maximum Overdrive is fun. But his version of The Shining...
Hello, you old bitch.
Oof. It is rough. The fact that he thinks his version, his miniseries The Shining, is better than Stanley Kubrick is crazy. But in any case, there's a lot of great Stephen King adaptations, a lot of bad ones, movies, TV shows, of course. But what about The Monkey? Right? The latest Stephen King adaptation. The adaptation of his 1980 short story of the same name. A short story which I'll admit I've never read myself. This is my first time being exposed to it. Well, for the people that need a synopsis, it follows these two twin brothers whose lives are turned horrifically upside down when they acquire a cursed toy, a monkey with drums that causes random... sometimes horrific, sometimes funny deaths around them. And the movie stars some recognizable people. Theo James plays both the twin brothers, the older versions, Hal and Bill. You also have Tatiana Maslany, who plays their mother in the film. And you got some other people that show up in the movie as well, like Elijah Wood has a small part in it. Now, the movie's also directed by Osgood Perkins, who is coming off of Longlegs, a horror film that I liked. But that movie has proven to be pretty divisive for a lot of people. There's people that really like it. There's people that thought it was good. And other people that fucking hate that movie. Right? And I think The Monkey is kind of going to be more of that for a lot of people. Maybe not to such a divisive degree as Longlegs, just because Longlegs was just so dark and weird and twisted. Had Nicolas Cage at an 11. The Monkey is more irreverent. This movie is not taking itself very seriously at all. This is a horror comedy through and through. In terms of the kills themselves, which, yes, there are some disturbing kills in this movie after the boys acquire the monkey from their father, who, I have to tell you right now, the intro of this movie I think is very, very well directed. And there's a surprise cameo appearance of a certain actor, comedic actor, whose name has been popping up more recently due to a certain show that's out there right now, which I thought was great. I think this movie has a very, very strong start and really showcases the best elements of the movie itself, which is its sense of humor, which is its oddball performances from its cast, and just the graphic nature of so many of the deaths. And the deaths are graphic and grotesque and just zany and over the top. I think that's what works about it. But so much of the movie is just indulging in the ridiculousness of this cursed monkey toy that just likes to kill random people if you just, turn the dial on his back. And we see a lot of that. We see a lot of the fallout of that ridiculousness through Theo James's dual role, his dual performance as these two brothers. Now, Theo James, I haven't been exposed to too much of his stuff, but he's an actor that I've come to appreciate more and more. Funny enough, after his voice performance in X-Men 97, he's actually the voice of Bastion, the main villain of that particular season. He did such a fantastic job. He just has a great voice in general. And not only does he play these two brothers in the movie, but he's also like the narrator for the film itself, explaining the events of the movie. And I think they just write. I mean, it's his film. It's really outside of the kills and the graphic nature of them. So much of the movie and its plot and its tone is just resting on his shoulders and the two characters that he plays. These two brothers who couldn't be more opposite. Obviously, deeply affected by the curse of the monkey. But But he is just so funny throughout this film and so awkward. I think he does a terrific job. Like as Hal, as the nerdy of brother, you know, after the events of the initial like monkey deaths, which cause untold misery for him and his brother for many years. He's just kind of become this recluse. He's this absentee father. He's incredibly socially awkward. He doesn't want to associate anyone because he's scared that they'll end up dying, you know, due to the monkey. So much of his story is focused on his relationship with his son, Petey. And they have a great dynamic in the movie as they kind of go on this father and son road trip. Very great back and forth, a lot of deadpan dialogue between them, but it really works. And then you have the other side of it, his other performance as Bill, who is like, you know, he was because he plays twin brothers, and he was the older of the twins. He came out of the vagine, you know, like 2 minutes before the younger one. And he's just a dick. He's just an asshole. Just this 90s bully, pretty much. Of course. Which, you know, Stephen King puts a lot of his own misery and his own childhood experiences in many of his characters. And I could tell that he put a lot of the bullies into this particular character. And he's just completely obnoxious initially as a child. But he gets even worse later on as an adult. And that also creates some pretty fun, interesting scenarios for Theo James to play along with. Tatiana Maslany, I think, does a great job in the movie as the mother. She doesn't have a lot of screen time, but when she's on screen, I think she's very fun, very weird, as are most of the characters in this film. Like, no one's giving, like, a normal performance. It just feels like we're in a world that just feels like it kind of has the vibe of something from The Office. Or Parks and Rec. It's just like, okay, but what if Parks and Rec or The Office, they did a horror episode where everyone's dying horrifically? That's kind of what the vibe of this is. And for me, it worked more than it didn't. There's some jokes that didn't land, honestly. But I would say like 70% of them did for me. It's dark. It's a dark sense of humor. It's mean-spirited. Like, you may like this initial character, you think this character's funny, well, you're going to see them die horrifically. In some cases, ridiculously. You see one character, I mean, I won't even spoil some of the deaths because I feel like they did too much of that in the trailers. And I actually avoided the second trailer because they actually spoil one of the big deaths in this. But you just see one character get a face full of something and then set on fire and then skewered and then eviscerated even more. It gets crazy. And if you have issues with violence, you have issues with gore, and a comedic take on all these things, then the monkey might not be for you. But I dug it. I think the kills are all very fun and over the top. There's some ones that surprise me. You think they're going to go in this direction with it, but then they end up not going. They do a little twist with them. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. But again, as I said, I think the cadence in which some of the characters talk are very, very odd. The humor is not going to hit for everybody. But for me, if you just go in not expecting like, oh, this is going to be The Shining, or this is going to be like Misery, it's like it's not. It's very much a comedy. It wears that on its sleeve, just from the dry, deadpan narration of Theo James to the ridiculous kills. But at the same time, it does have this undercurrent of fatherhood and what does it mean to be a father and the choices one makes and how does that affect other people around you? How does that affect your child, or in this case, your son? You know, do you think you're doing the right thing, or do you think in doing the right thing, you're actually harming them along the way? That I think is an interesting thing. But if you're just here for the comedy, if you're just here for the kills, this movie's got plenty of it. If you like awkward humor, if you like cringe situations, like things in The Office or Parks and Recreation, I think you're going to like it a lot. I had a good time with this movie. It's a fun film. It's not one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, but I think it's really solid and it's a good time. But what about you guys? I'm curious. Who here saw the monkey, right? I think the design of the monkey, great. Love the design of the monkey. He's bigger, too. I thought he was much smaller. I thought he was going to be the thing, something like fit in the palm of your hand. He's huge. You got to, like, carry him like a baby. You got to, like, get one of them baby carriers and just put him in there, and you can, like, waddle around with him. Didn't expect that. But overall, I had a fun film. It's a good movie. Good movie. But what about you guys?
5 minutes later.
Let's see here. Oh, Edgy Berserker, Kevin! Edgy, thank you so much for the very kind raid. What are you playing? What are you streaming? What are you doing? Good to have you here, Edgy. I was just reviewing Monkey, just doing a little short review. Maximum, we will do a Maximum Overdrive watch party someday, yes. Oh, who else is here? C.H. Mad Dog. Welcome, Mad Dog. Hope you're doing well. Pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining me. Theo James was able to survive a trash fire like Divergent trilogy and is showing his range acting. Yeah, he's really good. I think he's very good in this. He plays two very different characters, both who are affected emotionally and psychologically by what they went through in their childhood. And the child actors, I think, do a great job, too. I introduced to Theo James in the White Lotus Season 2. I got to catch up. I haven't watched White Lotus Season 2. I watched the first season. I thought it was great. And really liked his performance there and thought he was excellent in this movie doing the duel. Yeah, he did a really good job. So good, decent horror? Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a good, decent horror comedy. I can see where it might not work for everybody. Again, humor is the most subjective of genres. What I find funny may not find funny. But I found a lot of this funny. When I went there, they were selling monkeys of drums as popcorn buckets. I don't want that. They stare at me when I sleep. It's pretty creepy. And the monkey's vindictive. He's a son of a bitch, too. Because, you might have people going like, I want you to kill this person. The monkey's like, you don't tell me what to do. Okay? I kill who I want to kill. Or extra. And I can see that rubbing some people the wrong way. I get that. That being said, this movie has some of the worst dialogue I've heard. Perfect example is the priest. Oh, see, that's so funny. He could have been hilarious if he had been given funny stuff to say, but it landed flat. I actually liked that scene. Okay, so I know exactly in the movie, and the reason why I enjoyed that scene is I can totally understand why you don't like it. I get it. But the reason why I liked it is because my family literally had that priest. It was for the funeral of my grandfather on my father's side. I'll never forget this. It was so weird. Where we were having the funeral, and I'd never been to this church before. I'd never met this priest or something. And the priest just felt like, and you typically when you're a priest and you conduct mass, people might not be Catholic, you need to have like skills, like, public speaking skills, right? You need to be charismatic. If you're going to give a sermon, if you're going to like tell a story, right? You got to make a point like I think that's essential. You need to hone that. You need to craft that. This guy had none of that and was just socially awkward and stuttering and stammering. He went on a whole fucking tangent during my grandfather's funeral saying like, oh, your grandfather, he was, he lived a full life, and he did many good things and maybe bad things. Maybe he beat his wife. Like, I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not joking. He literally like said, maybe Frank Herman beat his wife. And I was just like, and no one said anything because it's such an awkward moment. It felt like a moment in that movie. It felt like a moment in The Office or Parks and Recreation where you're like, it's like Michael Scott getting up there and just saying something so incredibly offensive. And how do you even respond in that moment? Because it's like my grandfather's in the casket and you don't want to interrupt him because it's my grandfather's, that's what it was. And so, again, I had a very specific experience. And so that scene, I was like, yep, this happened. It's true. I'll never forget that. And it was like, oh my God. Yeah, I thought it was hilariously morbid. I love fun. This one's the Space Cowboy. What do you think about It? I like It. Well, the original It miniseries is fun. Like if it wasn't for Tim Curry, then it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be anything. And Tim Curry's brilliant. I love It Chapter 1. It Chapter 1, the first It's very good. It Chapter 2, it's fine. It's okay. It's not as good as the first one. Thankfully, you just watch the first It movie. It's like, it feels like a one and done. You don't need to watch the second part. And Wiki says, I absolutely love this film, and I'm so glad I went in knowing it was a dark comedy. Yes, go. It's not like it doesn't take itself seriously at all. I was playing Chu and Nikki Bakuretsu Rantuhen. I think I said that correctly. Basically, a Japan-only fighting game for the SNES, which is very homoerotic and amazing. Nice. Very good. Double. Here's the monkey is that big is because Disney copyrighted the symbol being monkey. For Toy Story, I read about that. That was crazy. I mean, it worked out because they actually do a lot of fun things with the drum. It's pretty good. Like the one thing I will say, the cinematography in the movie is kind of underrated, especially like how they film the monkey. They do like a lot of like up close shots of different parts of him, and they make it really scary. And they focus on the eyes a lot and the drum. It's pretty cool. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, goddamn. Yeah. I got to those comments about my grandmother's funeral. How about we beat what? Yep. Yeah, so I was like, yeah. It's happened. This is real. It's real. Also, I kind of picked up on that. Death is a big theme on Oscar Perkins' recent films. It's probably because of how both of his parents had treasure. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, well, yes, of course. Of course. Yeah, because didn't, well, of course, his father died under very tragic circumstances. Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates. And didn't his mom die during 9/11? She did. She was on one of the planes, right? Yeah. She was on one of the planes that hit the towers, I believe. Not to bring it down, but yeah. Ugh, it's terrible. I don't know much about you Hermans. Maybe your wife Peter's Chris's family. Yeah, pretty much. But it was my, as far as, I don't even know if he was like filling in for my, it wasn't like a church that I frequented with my family or with, like typically it was my father's, like parents, my grandparents on my father's side, their priest, I think their church. But it was just so fucking weird. I was like, what? Chris seeing that scene up this tracks. I was like, yeah, because I've been through it. And I feel like for a lot of people, they would go like, this is ridiculous. I'm just like, I feel like maybe Osgood Perkins or someone else or one of the writers had this experience. Because, yeah, maybe it was someone that went to my grandfather's funeral.